Well, our guest is Bob Chapman, who does, I don't know, 25, 30 hours of talk radio a week. He's probably the only person who does more talk radio than I do. Bob, what sort of response are you getting from these great audiences you have across America?
Well, I think at the beginning, over the last few months, it's been nominal. Kind of the same response I received in programs several years ago, because, people don't know who you are. And what's happening is I'm getting called back on programs. And that's where the real interest comes in, because that's where you develop a following. And I've just started to recycle the second time around with the programs that really want to have me. Usually hosts that understand things like you do, Stan, and they know the import of what I'm trying to get across. And if they don't want to go as far as I do, that's okay, because I say what they'd like to say, but they don't dare because they'll lose their job. And so I'm kind of a welcome figure on many of these Fox, ABC, NBC programs. And this morning I was on WPIX in Boston, which is the biggest station in New England, for a half hour, and explained the same things we're talking about now. And I had somebody call in chapter and verse before I explained some of the things you've heard this evening, like that. Somebody come in and laid it out. And I said, well, gee, that's what I was going to talk about. I want to thank you for coming in, but I agree with what you said. And then I added to it, of course. But there are people out there who understand, and they really go freako when they hear somebody like me on there, because they say, gee, how did they ever let this guy on there? I got to have my friends. I got to call them up and tell them to listen. And so then they write into the station and say, oh, please have that fellow back. And about a month or a month and a half later, they have you back. And then all of a sudden, they want to have you once a month. And then it goes to twice a month. And that's how it builds.
Well, I'm glad you're getting out there. Somebody had called in, asked if you had any recommendation about Americans thinking of moving overseas. Some people had suggested Costa Rica, Panama, Mexico, Chile. What about these people who say, oh, things are terrible here, I'm going to move overseas? Again, our number, 1-888-24-LIBERTY, 464-8295. What do you tell these people?
I tell them that the first thing you should do is go Google each one of those locations, whether it's Guadalajara, Panama City, San Jose, Costa Rica, or Santiago, Chile, or Montevideo in Uruguay. You just look at them all, their temperatures, what kind of businesses exist, is it a farming community, how close to the U.S. government is the government of that country, and those kind of things, and how much money can you bring in each month? Can you bring gold and silver coins in? Do you have to check in once a year and file papers to get a new visa? Will they let you become a citizen in 5 or 6 years if you'd like to? Or do they have a status where you no longer have to check in at the end of 5 years, and you just get papers filled out that make you an official long-term immigrant? You don't have to check in anymore. There's all kinds of things that you have to learn. And if you're older, it's easier. If you're younger and get kids, it's a hard situation.
Well, do you think it's going to be any safer in other countries than it will be here in the United States?
Yes, I do. I do. The further, it's just every country's different, and nobody's immune. And
hold that thought. We'll be right back here. Well, go right ahead with your discussion, Bob. You were talking about other countries, and other countries
right.
might be safer.
Well, even though there's corruption everywhere, and in Latin America, as an example, it's pretty blatant. the rich run everything, and they're all corrupt, and they hide their money offshore, and that's one of the reasons that the countries are so poor, because they don't have the money for development because somebody's got it over in the Cayman Islands or Bahamas or Bermuda or someplace. And there's also, whether people want to admit it or not, in those countries, there's a lot of racism. Not in the overt form that is found in Europe and the United States, but there's a color line. People of darker skin aren't looked upon as favorably as people with lighter skin, that sort of thing. It's real. And so with the families that live there, they usually get married within their own caste, if you want to call it that. But these are the people who got the money, and unfortunately the wages are very small for most people in those countries. They live in poverty, there's no question. And even people who have half-decent jobs. A bank manager only makes $1,500 a month throughout Latin America. And that's a good salary. The average person makes probably about $500 a month. It ranges anywhere from $300 to $800, so it's about $500. And I mean, the cost of living is probably, depending upon the country and et cetera, it ranges anywhere between 20 and 40% less than in the United States. In other words, most places, if you like steak, you can get a ribeye steak in a local restaurant, not some expensive place. In a local restaurant, you can get one for $7.50 or $8. There are places you can go in the same city and get one for $22, but they're still the same steak. And so, if you don't have to or don't want to go into expensive places, there's lots of places to eat that are inexpensive. Usually, fresh vegetables and foods are very inexpensive. The buses are very inexpensive. With the exception of certain countries, gasoline is about the same or less. It all depends on whether they produce
Hold that thought. We'll
oil.
be back in just a moment here. Well, this is Dr. Stan. Our guest is Bob Chapman, and certainly he's with the International Forecaster, and so I'm going to let Bob tell our listeners how they can subscribe to the International Forecaster if they'd like to. I certainly take the publication. I look forward to it coming twice a week. A fascinating source of information you're not going to get elsewhere. Our telephone number here, if you'd like to talk to Bob, 1-888-24-LIBERTY. 1-888-24-LIBERTY or 464-8295. And Bob, why don't you tell our listeners how they can subscribe to the International Forecaster?
Well, the forecast is about business, finance, economics, and social and political issues all over the world. We produce the email version on Wednesdays and Saturdays, runs around 35 or 40 pages. And we have a hard copy for those who are not on the Internet. It goes out twice a month. You can get a free introductory copy by going to our site, theinternationalforecaster.com. Theinternational, Forecaster.com. If you'd like to email us, that address is Bob, B-O-B, at INTFORECASTER.com. That's Bob at intforecaster.com, or you can call toll-free 800-375-4188. That's 800-375-4188.
All right, fine, Chris. All sorts of fascinating things and tragic things are happening. Certainly Chrysler's gone into bankruptcy. And, of course, the union is going to get most of the value of the company. the Fiat, they're going to give Fiat Motor Company, which of course is a run by people associated with the Trilateral Commission. Bob calls them the Illuminati, but the vice chairman of Fiat is certainly a member of the Trilateral Commission, and certainly the people who run our government come from the Trilateral Commission. 11 of them are in key positions, literally every key position in the Obama administration, including 5 people in our State Department, come from this small group with only 87 Americans in it, and yet they are running the Obama administration. And so they're going to turn Chrysler over to Fiat. Well, of course, some of the people, the state of Indiana, had actually invested some $42 million in Chrysler bonds, and they are only being offered about $5 million in return for them, and they're trying to block the sale. Well, the administration, which has no right to interfere in this is a legal matter. It should be handled by the bankruptcy court.